Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you 10 tips for reading in a foreign language. Pronti? Let's go. So I want this video to go straight to the point. We're going to divide it in two different parts, prepping for success and actual reading. So tip number 1, recognizing cognates and predicting content. Before starting to read in Italian, especially if you're reading original content, my suggestion is to always look at the big picture. Look at the title, look at the sidebars, look for images, look for statistics, illustration, data, anything that can help you better understand the general picture of what you are about to read. But most importantly, you have to start recognizing cognates from day one. So what is a cognate? A cognate is a friendly word, something that looks alike in both languages. Think of words like università, periodo, statua, monumento, cattedrale. These are all cognates because even if you don't speak one single word of Italian, you pretty much understood what I'm talking about. Of course, if you are unsure about a word, ask or look it up on the dictionary because there are a lot of false friends as well. Think about the word camera. Camera in Italian means room. So there are some false friends, but there are a lot of cognates. There's similar words that you can recognize. Tip number 2, skimming the text for the gist. I already talked about skimming and scanning in a previous video, but I want to repeat this technique because it's so helpful to get you started. It's literally the same thing that you do in your own language, which is going over a text to understand the general details and to get some background information about what you are about to read. So what do you have to do at this stage? 1, look for the main idea. 2, don't worry about the details. This is not the time. 3, look for the main concept for each paragraph. And number 4, find the main idea in the conclusion. But if it's a story, don't spoil yourself the ending. Just skip this step. Our tip number 3, and the last one of the prep section, is scanning for details. Think about even in your native language when you're looking for a quote or a specific passage that you want to find. What do? You're trying to locate a specific information. So scanning is the strategy that required quick but focused reading of the full text. You are very aware of what's there. So as you go over the text, try to look for familiar words, familiar constructions, anything that is already familiar to you and you don't have to research to understand. Also, if in this passage there are a lot of words that you don't know, don't stress, it's okay. Because remember that at this stage, after looking for cognates, after skimming and scanning, you are not fully reading the text yet. All you're looking is stuff that you already know, stuff that you're familiar with, and stuff that you can grab on to build more structure as you read, to help you as you read. It is basically prepping yourself for success. And this is the end of our first section. Now let's move on to actual reading. Tip number 4, building vocabulary. So at this point, if you're doing the whole reading in a foreign language stuff right, it means that you are consuming a lot of content, which translates to a lot of vocabulary. When you're reading, it's always a good idea to write new words down, but what do you really do with them? Because memorizing a whole word list, especially if it's long, can be daunting, bothersome, and if you don't remember it, quite frustrating. So here I'm going to give you a few strategies to help you understand and retain more vocabulary. 1, read aloud. Because sometimes a word that looks unfamiliar, once we hear the sound, it could help us recognizing a cognate. So a word that sounds similar. Number 2, and I can never stress this enough, build mental images. So invest time in building an image in your head for that vocabulary word. Create a scenario. Put all the details that you want because spending time doing this will make the word more memorable for you. Point number 4, and this is super great for beginners. If you're getting started right now with Italian, color code masculine and feminine, singular and plural. That will help you create a pattern in your head. Color coding is so important in language learning. I love it. I find it very easy to remember things with colors because I associate a color with a specific concept. And lastly, and most important tip of all in this section is do not look up for every single word you don't know. This is very important because you are disrupting your attention, you're disrupting and taking yourself out of the context every time you look up for a word as you read. So, like I said, do not look words up as you read. Do that after. Devote 5 minutes, 10 minutes after you're reading to look up for the words if you really want to know all of them. But my suggestion is take reading as an enjoyable moment. So get the words from the context. Guess. Do a lot of guessing. Yes, that really helps for vocabulary building. Our tip number 5 is understanding the sequence of the text. And this is a strategy that is very often overlooked because, like, yeah, sure, I'll study it later or I'll look for it later. No, actually, this is really important to level up both your listening and speaking skills. Because recognizing the structures, recognizing structural elements can really help you understand the relationships between the sentences. So some of the organizational patterns that you want to look for are, number 1, signal words that indicate a sequence in time or in importance. For example, dopo, poi, quando, allora. These indicate a sequence. Number 2, statements that help you understand that an action is either beginning or concluding. Like, for example, prima, dopodiché, infine. And of course, also dates indicate a sequence, so look out for those, especially if you're reading an article or something more eloquent or elaborate. Tip number 6, understanding newspaper articles. So let's say that your Italian is starting to get pretty good and you are ready to move into original content, right? So content for native speakers, and you want to test and try out newspaper articles. So obviously, this is not a tip for beginners. Do not, and I repeat it, do not start reading Italian fresh off the bat with newspaper articles or children's book. Children's book are no in Italian, don't do that. If you're a beginner, get some graded readings first because that helps build up your vocabulary and your confidence in reading until you get to the point in which you feel confident and comfortable reading newspaper articles. Because yes, newspaper articles are great native content, is stuff that Italians are reading, and so you are current and up to date with all those news, but they have their own set of challenges. Think about the headings of newspaper articles. They're meant to summarize what the article is about and give you a glimpse of the main topic. But often they're using puns, wordplay, sometimes they have double meaning, and especially sometimes they are made of incomplete sentences. But if you're adamant and reading Italian newspapers, that's what you want to do, here are some tips for you. First and foremost, look for pictures and captions. 2, check for diagrams, statistics, numbers, images, pictures, anything that can help you better understand the general picture of what the article is about and what side or position the journalist is taking. Look for pull quotes, those quotes that report a little part of the article, and definitely use the strategies that we talked about at the beginning of this video. So looking for cognates, skimming, and scanning. Here we go to tip number 7. We're almost done, but number 7 is reading for a purpose. The action of reading has a purpose. Well, actually has many, but the main purpose of reading is to get information. Think about it. We read to get directions, to get information, or sometimes even to practice a foreign language. But most importantly, I think we should read for pleasure and entertainment, especially if you're practicing a foreign language. So here, let me give you a couple of questions that can help you to get what you need. First, what do I already know about this subject? Am I familiar with it or am I not? Second, what is the purpose of reading this text? Is it helping me? Is it interesting? Is it useful? Why am I reading it? Third, what are the connections that I can make between this text and my personal life? Can I relate to this text? This is very important because tying the language to your daily life, it's the best way to remember vocabulary. Fourth, am I enjoying this reading? Am I enjoying this topic? Or am I just dragging my feet to get to the finish line? And these questions are very important because they set you up for success. They make you think and find material that is relevant, that is interesting to you. And this is very important because they boost motivation. If I'm reading a blog post about mental health or, working from home, these are things that are relevant to me. And so I'm interested in not only practicing the language, but also understanding what the text is saying. Tip number 8, recognizing word families. So if I say the word pane, you know the word pane means bread. But if I say panettiere, panetteria, panettone, do you see how all these words are related? Or commercio, commerciante, commerciale. Do you see how they have the same root? They belong to the same family. Or there are other groups of words like università, modernità, città, priorità, or lentamente, velocemente, paradossalmente. So you see, they belong to certain groups and certain families. So once you start noticing these patterns, here are 3 things that you can do. Number 1, identifying word roots. Number 2, identifying the patterns that that word root has. And number 3, decode the words. I actually have decided to add another step to our video division, so it's prep yourself for success, actual reading, and eventually level up. So our tip number 9 is check your understanding. How? Test yourself, and no, I'm not talking about those comprehension tests at the end of a graded reading, but I'm talking about testing yourself in real life. So here are your actionable steps. Step 1, after you read 1, 2, many times your text, could you tell in your own native language what the article or what the text is about? Like, oh, you know, I read a couple of pages, an article, or even just a paragraph, and it was about this. In your own native language. This is the comprehension, meaning that you could tell to a person what this article is about, like the general idea. Step number 2, could you make a summary in your target language? So the same language of the article or the thing you read. Could you make a summary in your target language? And remember that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have all the details that you remember seeing or reading in the text. Because even in your native language, if I ask you what was the article about, you wouldn't go over all the dates and all the details and all the little things. You want to know the general idea, the general picture. So if you can get past step 1, which was retelling what you read in your own language, even after several readings, it means that probably you chose a text that is too difficult for you. If instead you succeeded in step 1, so you retold it in your own language with no problem, but you're struggling with step 2, so retelling in your target language, that could be either a lack of vocabulary, and for that I recommend going back to point 4 of this video, or a lack of mental organization about this topic in your head. In this case, a quick solution could be to jot down a quick bullet point with the main points that you want to talk about. Here we are to our last tip, which is number 10, which is reading literature in a foreign language. Reading literature is usually a step above of everything we've talked about so far. So my recommendation before approaching a book that has been written for native speakers is this. First, read about the book itself, the author and his or her style. Does he or she portray life itself? Does it talk about society? Does it talk about imaginary world? So be prepared on what you are going to read, what the book style is. Then learn about the social and cultural aspects of the background of the book. For example, Pier Paolo Pasolini is very different than a book from Fabio Volo, for example. Another good tip is get acquainted with the passato prossimo. In Italian, it's called the literary past or the historical past. It's fairly regular. So what you have to do is just recognize the root of the verb and be familiar with the structure. You don't need to use it to speak, but you definitely need the passato remoto in Italian to read the book. And the last thing that I would recommend, this is definitely not a must-do, but something that I personally do. One whole book, it's a big endeavor. So my recommendation is to take notes and maybe summarize chapter by chapter so you'll be able to pick it up without skipping a beat. And of course, summarize and give you additional language practice. All right, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, and I know I will be making more of these videos, and hit the red subscribe button and subscribe to my channel. I will see you on Instagram, where I share more about Italian language, culture, history, and a bit of personal life. Otherwise, I'll see you back here in the next video. A presto! Ciao!